what I was going to talk about is, back in 2003, I was part of a team that made the first AR game, which was called iToy Play. I don't know if anybody here would remember that game. Actually, there's a few people do, yeah, showing your age there, guys. That game used basically a webcam. So in the early noughties, webcams became a big thing for plugging into PCs. And so using a webcam plugged into a PlayStation 2, there was a technology which just tracked motion, 2D motion. And so with that, you could stand in front of your TV, see yourself on TV, and wave at the screen. Now, and actually, the team developing that, they had a real light bulb moment around that, which was allowing the camera feed to be part of the game. So originally, there was this idea of like camera detection, but to control a typical 3D character world. So maybe like motion to move a character around. That was okay, but it wasn't probably as good as using a controller to move a character around. So it was like, that's interesting. But the moment when people put themselves on there, and there's like a classic game, iToy Play was a collection of 10 or 12 mini games, and probably the most famous was one called Wishy Washy, where this like soap suds would fill the screen, and you had to frantically clean it down to the tune of I've forgotten his name on the ukulele when I'm cleaning windows. That was licensed for it, I seem to remember. And actually seeing yourself on screen was quite entertaining, you know, and seeing the real world on screen was quite entertaining. And so that was a bit of a light bulb moment for that team. And so that started a bit of a trajectory of AR games in London studio. At that time, I was actually not on the teams. I was running, oh, here we go. Wow, look at that.
They've converted it, so
thank you so much, people at the back, for
formatting might be a little bit off, but it's there.
Formatting might be a little off, but there you go. Hey, all right, well, I'll back up a little bit. So, excuse the weird fonts, but, you know, that's me, Dr. Days Ranyard. Well, you know.
If you want to give me 30 seconds.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so first of all we made this iToy Play game. Then there was like iToy Play 2. There was a dancing game where you were doing this kind of thing. It was a big seller actually on PlayStation 2. Did 10 million plus units, which for console is pretty good numbers. One of the most interesting takeaways I had from this time was how Europe, the European marketing department of Sony, and how the US marketing department of Sony positioned the product. And it had a big impact, I think, on sales. So Europe positioned it as, hey, we've got this cool game, and by the way, you happen to need this camera to play it. So it was all about the game, and the camera was almost an answer, oh, by the way, just plug this in and you get to play it. Whereas the US positioned it as, hey, you can buy a camera for your PS2, and here's some things you can do with it. And I think the question for consumers in the US was, why do I need a camera for my PlayStation? And so they didn't pick up on it as well. It was positioned as you have to pay this cost for the camera and then you can buy these games. Whereas I think the cost was still the same. The Europeans positioned it as, this game costs this much, but you get a free camera. It's kind of different, but in terms of barrier to entry, that's something I want to return to. What were the barriers to entry of people playing those games? In the US, it was perceived, I have to buy this extra piece of kit, and then the value of the game isn't as much, and it doesn't feel right. Whereas in Europe, it was, hey, I get a game with a free camera. So, anyway, so after the iToy series came on PlayStation 3 something called iPet. I don't know how many people remember that. It was a cute kind of Tamagotchi game, and this had 3D depth. So actually it used a marker, like we saw in the last presentation. Initially it was launched with a card. You put that on the floor, the camera would detect where that was, and then it had a 3D plane, so this pet character could run around your feet. And that was kind of fun. It was a little bit flaky, because the card was actually quite a distance from the camera, and so it couldn't always pick it up, and it would, actually kids still enjoyed it because they don't really care exactly whether the pet is running perfectly on the floor. They just kind of want the fun of interacting with it. And a year later, the Move controllers came out for PlayStation, and you could then use that, which did give it a more accurate read. I wasn't that involved in that project. I was busy making a game called SingStar, which was a singing game that did have some AR in it as well. And then after the iPad series, there was something called Wonderbook that I became the exec producer of, which I'm now going to talk about because it comes up in these slides. Great. So that's me, Dr. Days Ranyard. I think we've done all that bit. I just wanted to cover this off a little bit, which is what is AR, and I know some other people have covered it. This is like what's available now, and previously with the PlayStation version and console version of AR was actually that you had a little camera and you had to look at the TV screen to kind of get the benefit of what was happening. Then with a mobile device now, you have to hold the mobile device in front of you like this to get the benefit. But if you have a headset, you kind of get the augmented reality in the room with you. So it feels like they're steadily moving towards like potentially more compelling experience. But there's different attributes to them, which we'll talk about. So the mobile, as we know, there's a huge addressable market. So if somebody cracks it, you can kind of take off pretty quickly. Whereas the headsets, there's a much smaller addressable market. And we'll talk about that a bit as well. So this is iToy iToy Play. So that's wishy-washy, you just wave at it. It was a lot of fun. It was a bit like the Generation game, that's what I always thought of. It was like in-room social, and you needed that camera to plug in to make it work. Then we've got iPet, and this used a card. So it had a card with a paw print on as a marker that you put on the floor, and then it worked with a Move controller. So for me, that had actually a little bit more tech around it that you had to sort out. And this is what I was just talking about. So Wonderbook, this was like a big, very exciting project. We worked with J.K. Rowling on it. She wrote some stuff for it. And it had this book. So that book is actually augmented reality markers. And you'd put it on the floor in front of you, you'd angle the camera, and then you used the Move controller as a magic wand. And then dragons would fly out of the book, set it on fire, and all kinds of crazy stuff. And that was very interesting. You were part of it. It actually led into our working in VR because you were part of the game. You were actually a player in the game, not controlling another character. But I think, and we did well with this actually, and I think Wonderbook, the series would have continued if the camera was going to be in the box for PlayStation 4. But there was a war of price on PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, and the cameras were in and out. They were doing the hokey-cokey every other week. And eventually the camera wasn't in the box for PlayStation 4, so there wasn't that tie ratio. And if you look at anything really that has additional hardware, probably the highest tie ratio you can get to is maybe 10%. If you look at, and I know it's expensive, but the PlayStation PSVR headset is like around 2 million, but there's probably 80 million PlayStations, so that's actually running at 2.5%. For microphones on cameras, I think 7% was about the average. So as soon as things aren't part of the core hardware, you've got that challenge that only so many people are going to get there. Now, we'd still made profitable games doing that, but you've got to be aware of that as a barrier to entry. And then this is some stuff that we did on SingStar PS4. So using the PlayStation camera that wasn't in the box but was available to buy, you could add faces and things to the people playing SingStar. So another bit of AR. That was more of a side part of AR. It wasn't part of the core experience. You needed the camera for one thing, but actually, you know, the people that did do that enjoyed it and got a lot out of it. That is SingStar and not Lambda Star. But anyway, there we go. Then, nothing to do with me, but I thought it's worth mentioning Pokemon Go. So the question here is Pokemon Go an AR game or a geolocation game? It is both. However, you need the geolocation to play it, but you don't need the AR. I suspect we are getting more AR coming through now for Pokemon. I suspect there'll be more of that happening as we know that ARKit and ARCore are coming from Apple and Android. So, talking about these two properties, we've made a game for ARKit, which we released similar time to Travis, who was up here before me. And the thing that's interesting here is the number of devices that will be able to use ARKit. It's relatively straightforward and, in a sense, light. What you can do with it, it can find a flat surface, so that's the floor or a tabletop, really. Can't find walls yet, but it's version 1.0 of their ARKit. And basically, ARCore can do the same. So they're quite simple, but the fact that they're built into the OS means that it's much easier to develop for. So when I was running London Studio, at one time we had a vision team of 12 really, really smart, Cambridge PhD computer vision people who were building the libraries to do things like Wonderbook and iPad and so on. And that, as a cost of entry to it as a category, is really high. But, so if we'd made the game that we've made, I'll show you in a minute, Orbu, ourselves, it probably would have taken 2 years to find the services, make that robust, play test it, make sure it works on dedicated handsets. So the fact that it's built into the OS for both of them is a huge deal. And also, it's actually great that they're both doing it because they're going to compete with each other for additional features as we move forward. So it is a big deal, but it's an early space to be in. This is Orbu. So it's basically uses a mini golf mechanic, and then we create these different levels, and you've got a little character that rolls up into a ball, and you can kind of fling them around, and they love it. It's fine, they don't get upset or hurt. We made it so that you can make it relatively small, tabletop, or you can make it bigger, and actually you can make it pretty big and go outside. The thing, and I think Travis touched on this in his talk, is that at the moment the audience don't really know what AR is and how you can use it and what's the benefit. And fundamentally, there's an education piece for people to get excited about it and for them to change their play behaviour. Because at the moment, for example, you can't use AR on the tube because the gyros go crazy. And so it won't fix somewhere. And also, the tube's packed sometimes. And so if you suddenly start getting your AR game out and there's a load of people there, it's not a great play behaviour. So that's like traditional mobile play behaviour, right, while you're commuting on a train or whatever. It's different for AR games. So that's not to say they're not valid. People use the camera on their phone an awful lot, but they don't use it on the tube. And they've learned to use the camera at the right time. So I think there's an opportunity to kind of show the benefits of AR to the consumers, but that's an education piece that still needs to happen. And that's why it's interesting to talk to people like Apple and Android about how they're positioning AR and how they want to help their customers understand what it can do for them. And I think that that's a strategy for them for the long term, because actually AR could be a huge part of the computing platforms of the future. So this comes to, actually I had 500 million in there, so from the last talk it's actually going to be 800 or something by the end of this year, so that's quite good. But this is one of the Apple keynotes talking about having 500 million phones now that can work with ARKit. So if you look at something like VR, how many headsets? There's maybe 10 million, 20 million if we're lucky. This has got over 500 million opportunity to sell to market now. So that's quite a big difference between those two categories. I also just want to mention these headsets. So this is particularly, I think this is very interesting. It's the Lenovo Disney headset that came out at Christmas with it's a Star Wars only. It's not like you can load any games onto it, but it's actually really the first consumer AR headset. It's $200. You put a phone in it, and then it uses mirrors to reflect them onto glass in front of you. It needs to be in a darker room. It uses a little beacon, they call it, that basically is a PlayStation Move controller cut off. So it's a little ping pong ball that glows to find where the floor is. And I don't know how good it is. I think it's probably all right. But I think this is really interesting because this is in consumer price. And it's actually, there's no nausea because you're looking through glass. You're not like replicating the whole world. So that's kind of interesting. And then this is the Magic Leap 1, which has been announced and will come out this year. And Magic Leap are an AR company who've raised $2 billion in investment and are valued at something like $8 billion. They haven't really shown their hand or shown anything. The only thing they've shown is how much investment they've raised. I haven't seen it. It is apparently amazing technology, but the challenge for them is to reduce it in size so it becomes applicable to like a pair of glasses. So I think at the moment, the phone has this huge market. These headsets will have a much smaller market, but will be a bit more AR-y. So the phone is like a stepping stone and a learning point for consumers as to what AR can do in the future. So, this one hasn't come out quite as well. But anyway, so barriers to entry, certainly on the phone side. So from our game Orbu, it's $2.99 in the store. We had some wonderful featuring from Apple, which we're very grateful for, which has helped us get it out there. But as a number of people have said, for AR games, you need to make something small that's premium priced, really. It's difficult to put a budget together to create a free-to-play game that it's going to take you a long time to develop, so the budget's high. At the moment, the number of users of AR is still relatively small, so that won't necessarily work. So the accepted wisdom is that at the moment, you need to go premium. So people have got to pay for something. Or if you go onto the App Store or the Play Store, there's so many things for free. That's the first barrier to entry. Oh, I've got to pay for this. The second one is, actually, on iOS, you have to upgrade the iOS to the latest iOS. So you might even go, do you know what, I'm going to buy this. And you get to that point of buying it, you go, oh, I've got to upgrade the iOS to do this. Oh, I'm not doing that yet. I've heard it does whatever. I mean, there's always rumours about what the new latest iOS does to your phone. And so what we've heard is that about half of the iPhone users have upgraded to the right iOS. So you think that's cutting that market in half at the moment. Obviously, that's going to change. Even a month from now, it will have changed. But that does reduce, and it's another barrier to entry. And I'm going to pay for this, and I've got to upgrade the iOS. And then underneath this black square is a question mark. So it's not that exciting. But really, that, for me, is explaining to customers why they should get AR. Why is that going to be more fun than playing Candy Crush? And that's a challenge. And you have things like the App Store preview and so on to explain that stuff. But nobody's really... People are experimenting with how to explain it, but I wouldn't say anybody's kind of nailed it in an icon. Looking at this icon, I know I'm going to be able to go down the park with my son and play this game, and it's going to be really fun. Right? You know, we're still learning how to put those messages out there. But ultimately, all these things are software in one sense or another. So, or by that I mean they're not hardware. So to get past all these barriers, I don't need to buy another piece of hardware. So like on PlayStation 2, to play iToy, I needed a camera. On PlayStation 3, to play Wonderbook, I needed a camera, a book, and a Move controller. So the tie ratio there is obviously a challenge, and trying to get people to buy more hardware is difficult. None of these require the customer to buy more hardware. And so my theory, and I don't know whether this is going to be true or not, but what I'm going to put forward today is that somebody this year will bring out a very viral AR game or experience or thing that you can do in AR, and it'll spread around, you know, probably start with my 12-year-old daughter and her friends, and then it will spread to somebody else, and spread to, you know, to these different demographics. And that will get people to understand what AR is, and that will then open the door for other people to go in there. In the same way that perhaps Candy Crush did for free-to-play or something like that. Free-to-play casual, say. So I think that somebody will do something. I'm going to have a go myself, but might not be us. There's a whole world of people out there. But some app will come along that just engages people and is viral, and that will then open the doors for AR. So I think my sort of conclusion on this is it's a waiting game. You can be out there, you can do something, it's kind of interesting. You know, we're doing all right numbers, but we're not going to retire yet. But there'll be the inflection point is easier on this mobile AR than it is on any of the other immersive tech that we have around. And then this is, I don't know what this is. Okay, right, okay, this is things that we don't know. So where is the gold rush is the first one. I.e., why aren't all developers flocking to it? Well, it's difficult because with it being premium, relatively small experiences at the moment, it's difficult to see what the return is. I know all the, quotes, big boys in mobile are watching and waiting, you know, waiting for somebody to kind of crack it, to find out what works. There's a thing I've often thought about, which is being in the right place at the right time. But you can be in the right place for a long time, and then the right time turns up. So that's kind of an interesting way of looking at things. If you can keep going, keep making things, trying different things, and making sure that you're always like improving your profit slightly, then something could just go. What is the business model? Is it going to be the same as free-to-play? Is free-to-play just going to map onto AR at the point when there is an inflection? Or is it going to be something else? You know, is it going to be more linked to geolocation? Maybe, Jesus, it does get confusing. That's geolocation, that one. Is it going to be something that is linked to geolocation, a la Pokemon, and maybe that is the thing that hits the consumers, that it's about their location and where they are and where they can go to and how they can use that in AR. Is there going to be an inflection point, and when's it going to be? And like I say, you know, so I've worked in VR and AR, and for VR we kind of have a better understanding of the ramp now. It's slower than some people thought, early investors probably, but nevertheless it's growing and growing and growing, and we can kind of see, but we also know there's a fairly big barrier to entry there, which is I've got to buy some hardware, and that kind of goes back to the learnings we had from iToy and SingStar on those games that I used to work on that had hardware associated with them. But with this, there's no hardware required, so that means it could flip quite quickly.
What's the benefit?
Thank you. What is the benefit? And that is the last one. What's the feature of AR that's going to excite customers the most? We're all trying different things, but what's the one that's going to grab them? Is it like a virtual board game? Is it going out to the park and playing something that's enormous? Is it, you know, doing some multiplayer in-room with their friends? Is it online multiplayer? I think there's a number of different things that people can try, and is it linking it into stuff like Snapchat? I think there's a number of things that people can try, and something's going to catch. And that is the end of this. I think I've run out of time anyway. Happy to take any questions, and I'll be around for a bit as well.
Cool. We've got time for one question, if there are any. Oh, okay. Has to be a quick one. Quick one, yeah?
So one of the things that happens with video games is they tend to lead to the creation of new technology, and also the adaptation of new technology by the general users. Is that something you see for augmented reality, especially seeing as at the moment everyone's focusing on using mobile phones, whereas mobile phones is used for gaming usually in bed, on the train, or will there be something else that kickstarts augmented reality as a common use?
So I think augmented reality is probably like one of the next computing platforms. If you look at other things that are happening in the tech world, like a spatial OS, just what Improbable are doing, some other people, and I think just adding things to our world will make a big difference. I also think the next computing paradigm is going to be AI, and augmented reality is a great interface to AI, whereas a traditional computer screen is not a great interface to AI. So I think it will happen. I do think it will happen through entertainment. So whether that's strictly a game with a high score or a slightly more experiential thing. So, you know, I don't know, musically is a game, but it's not, I don't think it has a high score. Or what's another example? Or even just like photo sharing. It's not really a game, but it's an entertainment experience. So I think entertainment will be the thing that educates people on the benefits, and then it will be used for a lot of productivity. I mean, imagine glasses. If you get to the point of wearing augmented reality glasses in the same way you used to wear headphones, then, you know, we've had 10 years of people doing this, right? How many times you walk down the street and somebody's doing this? That's going to go away. So maps will just show you in your glasses, turn left, turn right, it'll overlay on the road, the name of the road. That will just, if we can get to that, and we know it's doable, everybody will do it. But I think the adoption will be through entertainment.